This isn't artificial sweeteners are poison, and it isn't that they're perfect either. The truth depends on what you're measuring, which sweetener you're using, and what it's replacing in your diet. Because most people aren't asking the real question, safe compared to what, sugar, water, or your third, zero-calorie, snack of the day. If you want the honest longevity compass version, it's this. Low, no-calorie sweeteners often look helpful or neutral when they replace sugar calories, and they look murkier when they're layered on top of a highly sweet, ultra-processed diet. The internet turns this into tribal war. We're turning it into a decision tree. Today I'll give you a practical, use case, framework, plus who should limit sweeteners, and a simple 14-day audit that tells you whether they're helping you or quietly keeping your cravings alive. We'll cover the gut, glucose, appetite, and brain, without fear-mongering or pretending the data is more settled than it is. And yes, we'll talk about the sweeteners that deserve extra scrutiny. First, we have to stop lumping everything into one scary bucket called artificial sweeteners. There are two big categories that behave differently, and if you ignore this, the rest of the conversation becomes noise. Category 1 is high-intensity, non-nutritive sweeteners, things like aspartame, sucralose, saccharin, and ace-sulfame K, plus natural ones people use similarly, like stevia and monk fruit. Category 2 is sugar alcohols, also called polyols, erythritol, xylitol, sorbitol, maltitol. These are not the same metabolic story as aspartame or sucralose, and they're definitely not the same gastrointestinal story. If you've ever had sugar-free candy confidence, you already know what I mean. Now here's the North Star of this entire episode, replacement versus addition. If sweeteners replace sugar, like swapping sugary soda for diet soda, that's a real change in calories and glucose load. If sweeteners are added on top of a diet that's already hyper-sweet and ultra-processed, the benefit often collapses and the cravings can get weird. So instead of asking, are sweeteners safe? We ask, safe compared to what, for which outcome, and for which person? Because the evidence looks different depending on whether we're talking about acute glucose, long-term weight change, microbiome shifts, or observational dementia associations. That's why your friend swears sweeteners saved them, and your other friend swears sweeteners ruined them. Let's start with glucose, because this is where people confidently say the wrong thing. Most of the acute human evidence suggests that non-nutritive sweetened beverages do not spike blood sugar like sugar-sweetened beverages. In many trials, they look much closer to water than to sugar for post-meal glucose and endocrine responses. That's an important anchor for sanity. If someone is switching from regular soda to diet soda, they're not drinking liquid sugar anymore, and that matters. But it doesn't mean every sweetener is neutral in every context, and it doesn't mean chronic exposure is identical for every person. Here's where nuance enters. Sucralose is the sweetener that shows up repeatedly in possible exception discussions. Some trials suggest that sucralose, especially when combined with carbohydrate intake, may impair glucose handling in certain settings, while sucralose without carbohydrate looks less concerning in those same designs. Translation: sweet taste plus a carb-heavy processed meal might be a different metabolic signal than sweet taste by itself. And then there's the personalized response angle. One influential randomized trial found that different sweeteners changed microbiome and metabolome signatures in distinct ways, and that saccharin and sucralose were linked to worse glycemic responses at the group level. Plus, microbiome transplants into mice partially transferred those glycemic effects. That's a big reason the gut debate exploded, because it suggests the microbiome may be part of why some people respond poorly. But we also have randomized controlled trials where realistic doses of aspartame or sucralose over short periods showed minimal changes in gut microbiota composition and fermentation markers. So the most honest takeaway is not sweeteners destroy your gut. It's human data are mixed, and response may depend on baseline microbiome, dose, and context. So how do you apply that without becoming the person who brings a stool sample to brunch? You watch outcomes you can actually feel and track. If sweeteners reliably trigger bloating, gas, looser stools, or a weird appetite rebound later in the day, your body is giving you actionable feedback even if the average trial result is neutral. Now let's talk appetite and cravings, because this is where the internet gets dramatic. The best sustained intervention evidence generally shows that low-calorie sweeteners can help reduce body weight and energy intake versus sugar. But compared with water, differences are often small or absent, which means sweeteners are not a magic weight loss code, they're a tool for reducing sugar calories. This is why replacement versus addition matters so much. Sweeteners work best when they displace sugar and don't trigger compensation later. If your brain interprets 0 calories as a permission slip to snack, you can end up right back at the same total intake, just with a different set of ingredients. And this is where the argument splits. Some mechanistic studies suggest that sweet taste without expected calories may change appetite signaling in certain people, and some work has shown sucralose can increase hunger-related brain signals compared with sucrose. But other controlled trials show no meaningful worsening of appetite, and some show neutral to favorable effects depending on the food matrix and the person. Here's the longevity compass synthesis. Sweeteners do not reliably make everyone hungrier, but they also don't guarantee weight loss unless they actually replace sugar and you don't compensate later. So if you're using sweeteners and still craving snacks constantly, it may not be lack of willpower. It may be a reward loop problem that sweet taste keeps training. Now the brain section, the most clickable, and the easiest to overclaim. There are acute studies suggesting sucralose can alter brain signals tied to appetite regulation, which supports the idea that some people may feel hungrier afterward. That's interesting and plausible, but it's not the same as diet soda causes dementia. When people talk about dementia, much of the concern comes from observational studies where higher artificially sweetened beverage intake is associated with higher risk of stroke or dementia. Observational signals matter as watch this space, but they do not prove causation, because people who choose diet products often differ in baseline metabolic risk, diet quality, and health history. The honest statement is, the brain story is emerging, worth watching, and not settled enough to convict sweeteners as a causal driver. Now we need to address the aspartame headlines, because they confused everyone. In 2023, one WHO-linked cancer research body classified aspartame as possibly carcinogenic, based on limited evidence, while a separate expert committee reaffirmed the acceptable daily intake. Regulatory agencies like the FDA still consider approved sweeteners safe within established intake limits, and the key distinction is hazard classification versus real-world risk at typical exposure. So if someone says, aspartame is banned, that's not true. And if someone says, aspartame is definitely harmless, that's also too confident for the way public trust works. The safe, evidence-first approach is, don't mega sweeteners, don't make them your personality, and focus on overall diet quality and sugar reduction first. Now the erythritol wrinkle. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol, not a high-intensity sweetener, and it deserves its own lane because it's under more cardiovascular scrutiny than most people realize. NIH summarized research raising concerns about thrombosis-related mechanisms and associations, but regulators have noted the data do not establish causality. Here's the practical longevity compass stance. If you're high cardiovascular risk and you're consuming erythritol-heavy products daily, consider a cautious approach until the story is clearer. And regardless of cardiovascular debate, sugar alcohols can cause GI distress in many people, especially at higher intakes. If your healthy cookie turns into a digestive betrayal, that's not a morality test, it's a dose test. Okay, now I'm going to give you the actual use case framework, because this is what people will save and rewatch. Think of it as 4 lanes: green, neutral, yellow, and red flag. The goal is not to ban sweeteners, the goal is to use them intelligently. Green light, you're using sweeteners to replace sugar. You used to drink sugary soda, sugary coffee drinks, sweet tea, or dessert nightly, and sweeteners help you reduce sugar without feeling deprived. In this lane, sweeteners often help more than they hurt because the alternative is a big sugar load. Neutral lane, you use sweeteners occasionally inside an otherwise high-quality diet. A protein powder, yogurt, or one diet drink a few times a week, while most of your diet is protein-forward, fiber-forward, and minimally processed. For many people, this is unlikely to be the reason their health stalls. Yellow light, sweeteners are everywhere, all day, and the diet is still ultra-processed and constantly sweet. If your daily pattern is sweet taste from morning to night, cravings and compensation are more likely, and the benefit of calorie substitution is less likely to show up. In this lane, the move is not panic, it's reducing your overall sweetness exposure and upgrading the food quality around it. Red flag lane, special cases. If you have PKU, you must avoid or restrict aspartame because it contains phenylalanine. If you have IBS or sensitive digestion, polyols may be a problem. And if you personally notice that sucralose-heavy products reliably trigger stronger hunger, anxiety, or snack hunting, that's a valid reason to limit them even if the average trial result looks neutral. Now let's make this actionable with a 14-day sweetener audit. Not forever, not a lifestyle identity crisis. Just a short experiment that reveals whether sweeteners are working for you or keeping you stuck. Days 1 to 7. Keep sweeteners in only one place per day. Choose your 1 use case. Maybe coffee, maybe one diet drink, maybe one protein shake. Everything else becomes water, sparkling water, or unsweetened tea, and yes, the first 2 days may feel emotionally rude. Days 8-14. Decide what you actually miss and what you don't. If you don't miss sweeteners, that's your answer, your taste system adapted fast. If you miss one use case, keep it, and remove the background sweetness that was training cravings all day. While you run the audit, track 3 signals. 1. Cravings and snacking, especially in the afternoon and evening. 2. Digestion, bloating, stool changes, discomfort. 3. Sleep and next day appetite, because poor sleep amplifies cravings and makes every sweetener debate feel louder than it is. Here's the final longevity compass verdict. Artificial sweeteners are not automatic villains, and they're not automatic freebies. For many people, they're a useful bridge away from sugar, and the biggest win is still reducing added sugar and ultra-processed foods overall. So use sweeteners as a tool, not as a foundation. If you're using them to reduce sugar, great. If you're using them to keep a relentlessly sweet diet alive, pull back, run the audit, and retrain your palate. If this helped, hit like and subscribe. Check the description for tools and affiliate links that match today's episode, plus our Longevity Compass Amazon KDP book. And in the comments, tell me, which sweetener do you use most, and what happens to your cravings afterward?